Ms. Dr. Williamson. Thank you so much for your responses to this discussion. I just wanted to quickly jump in and offer some suggestions. All of you that responded had some really good thoughts. Statistics was one area that many of you mentioned. A couple of things you want to remember, they do give you the formulas. So figuring out death rate, figuring out bed ratios, figuring out newborns, all of those statistical formulas that are unique to HIM. You will have access to them when you're taking the exam. The key is that you have to know which one to use and you have to know where to put your numbers, right? One thing I will tell you is one of the tips that was shared with me many years ago when I was an undergraduate taking statistics. And I still use it now when I teach students. I teach student statistics at the graduate level. It's always going to be what happened over what could have happened. So if the hospital has 500 beds and only 300 of them are occupied, your top number is going to be 300 and the bottom number is going to be 500. So what happened over what could have happened? And that's just a very basic kind of thing to keep in your head. Obviously, you should be practicing statistics. I gave you some tips, some websites to look at, but you should also be looking at those types of questions in your review guide and any other materials that you have. Hopefully, you have your statistical textbook from class, and you can go back and look at those exercises. The other one a lot of you mentioned was domain 1. And I think one of the challenges with that domain is all the different terminologies. I would remind you to go back to using flashcards. Very simple. Take a notebook, piece of paper, index cards. And when you are, waiting for your kids to come out of school, or you're at the soccer game and your team is winning, you can flip out those flashcards and go through those terminologies. One of the main ones you want to make sure you understand is HIPAA. And you can Google HIPAA and you can see all the current information that you've already been exposed to, but that's a good way to refresh. The other one from a data set standpoint is the UHDDS data set, which is a Uniform Hospital Discharge data set that has to do with coding, specifically inpatient coding. And then, of course, we have the coding classification systems, which sometimes people talk about them as data sets. And that would be currently ICD-10 PCS, ICD-10 CM, and HCPCS. Remember, CPT is part of HCPCS. CPT by itself is not a coding system. It's part of HCPCS coding system. So one of your tools and strategies definitely should be your course textbook, the review guide for this class. The other really good resource in general would be your textbook from the HIT 101 class, the sales book. And again, I would encourage you to think about how you are studying. Don't just be reading information. If there are questions, for example, let's say in the HIT 101 textbook, there's questions in that textbook at the end of the chapter or within the chapter. You should be perhaps writing down your answer to those questions on a piece of paper and then checking the answer key in the back of the book. And if you don't get the right answer, you go back to that chapter and you critically identify what area you missed and why you chose the wrong answer. You could do that same strategy when you're doing mock exams. If you signed up for the RHIT, you got the RHIT review guide, you should have gotten access to, I believe, even if you got the hard copy book. But I know if you got the ebook, there is an online database that AHIMA has that has mock questions. And the good thing about that particular database is that you can tailor it. So if you just want to look at questions for domain 1, you could just pick domain 1. But taking these mock exam questions is the key. because this exam, the RHIT exam, is going to be a timed event. You're not going to have a lot of time to sit there and think about a question for 5 minutes. So you want to practice, time yourself, even if you're looking at, once you feel like you got to a good point and you're using your past course materials and you're creating your own mock exam, for example, you want to time yourself. Give yourself maybe in the beginning 3 minutes a question. So if you're taking a 5-question quiz that you've created because it happens to be, the questions that were in the textbook chapter, so that's 15 minutes. Use your phone, and then you want to work up to thinking about having 1 minute to 2 minutes per question. Some questions won't take you as long, but some questions will take you longer, and that is the key. Also, again, use flashcards. Don't forget the old kind of the non-technological stuff that you can do that won't cost you a significant amount of money. When I was in your shoes, so to speak, when I was in my RHIA, preparing for my RHIA program, we actually wrote our own questions because we had a very thin review guide. It was published by AHEMA, but it was really, really small. It was one of the first ones that they ever published, and there weren't a lot of questions in there. So we actually, each of us took a turn, because I was in a study group, and we all took a turn and wrote 5 questions, and then we got together on Saturday and talked about those questions and the correct answer. And you could do that for yourself, or you can partner up with someone. You certainly could partner up with someone who's in this class, or maybe you have a classmate that you really got along with well, who isn't in this class for whatever reason, and you want to maybe partner up. Write 5 questions during the week on a specific topic or a specific chapter from a specific textbook, and then you get together on the weekend and you give each other those questions and see what the other person gets for the answers, and then you discuss them. So there's a lot of different strategies. But I think the key, of course, as I've mentioned before, is finding out which specific areas, which specific domains are the ones that you need to focus in on. And at some point, you should look at all of them, because obviously you have to complete, or hopefully you complete the entire exam, right? You take all the questions because you don't want to leave any of the questions blank when you're actually taking the RHIT exam, because you don't know which of those questions are what they call test questions. And so it's the best strategy so that you don't lose any points simply by not answering a question. If you have any specific concerns about this video, please let me know.